Welcome everybody to the Bitter Wolves, the Bitter Interviews number. I have absolutely no idea, to be quite honest with you. But I think the biggest percentage of the Bitter Interviews so far have been with my good friend, Mr. Chris Vander Kaay. Welcome back, Chris.
Thank you so much for having me again, Isaiah. I really appreciate it. It's always fun to come and talk, whatever we end up talking about.
We're here to talk about your new show. You've been here before to talk about Ask, but for everyone, if you haven't seen any of these episodes with Chris Vander Kaay in the past, Chris is a filmmaker. He's a writer, director, actor, even though he doesn't like me to call him that, a producer, all of these things. So Chris, welcome back. And we're talking about your new show, Found Footage Finds, today. So this is really exciting. You want to tell us a little bit about the show?
Found Footage Finds is a 5-episode docuseries, 5 episodes for season 1, depending on if we go longer. But each episode is a documentary episode shot in found footage style that focuses on a single subgenre of found footage film. And then in that episode, do a lot of recommendations. We have some filmmaker interviews. We dig into sort of the history and philosophy behind the genre, a little bit of behind the scenes. So it's really just sort of like a love letter to that particular subgenre of found footage, and then also a bunch of recommendations and conversations with people involved in it.
Beautiful. And when did you get the idea that you wanted to do the show? Because I know you're a big found footage fan, and you've also made your own film, which we'll talk about a little bit later as well. What we've talked about in depth before. But when did you get the idea? You were like, I want to do a show about this.
Well, so many years ago, I had planned to write a book about found footage filmmaking, and I was going to sort of collect conversations with a ton of filmmakers, and I was going to try and make it like an all-encapsulating, like here's all the entries of found footage. The problem with that is that literally every month there's 30 more found footage films. So you get, once a book is a year old, there's how many hundreds of new movies are there by the time you finish putting out a book? Right. So that didn't seem realistic. And that was probably 2015, 2016. And obviously there's been tons since then. But when I had started looking at that, I started making lists. At first they were just on Word, but now that I have Letterboxd, I've been creating lists and lists. And I think I've been in excess of 1,800 found footage films now on one master list. But then I also started dividing them into categories, because I find that people like a certain kind of thing, and what I like is to be able to provide them whatever that thing is. Like I'm kind of a curator. So if someone says, I really love movies about influencers and streamers, then rather than just sending them the 1,800 master list of all the found footage films, I'm like, well, it would be better if they were, in a single list. And then I started thinking, there's got to be a shape for this thing, right? Like I could do something with it. And I originally thought of podcasts, but then I thought, like, I don't want to do a podcast, because that's signing me up for a long series of things. Sure. I gotta be on a schedule, all that. And then I realized I had also at the same time been looking for something that was a follow-up to Ask, that I could do the distribution for myself as opposed to going through a distributor, because I wanted to learn the process. And, in order to be able to continue putting stuff out, I want to know every step of it. So I thought, well, this would be a good place to start. This would be a TV series. It's 5 episodes. That seems like a fun thing to shop around and figure out. And I knew I was going to be basically all the parts of this one. I wrote it and directed it. And although I'm not starring in it because there's no performances, it's documentary, I am the lead in it. So so it just it came together as a TV series because it's the one thing that made the most sense for all of the moving pieces.
Absolutely, yes. And I think it's the perfect medium for that, as you said, because we've talked about the democratization of filmmaking through found footage in the past. And because it's so accessible, that is like the biggest chunk of new movies that we get every year would be found footage. And it's exciting because it gives people an avenue to do it. So I think this is great because it gives you like an endless stream of things to talk about,
Yeah. Well, and it's also the genre, I think, that the filmmakers, whether they're supremely talented or they don't know what they're doing, all of them struggle the most to find their audience because of the scale of what we're working on. You know what I mean? We start at the bottom rung, and anything we do, we work our way up, as opposed to the other way, which is they have a ton of money, they make a movie, and then it sort of filters its way down through the culture. We got to kind of like bubble up through the rock, like spring water, basically. So, It was interesting. It was interesting to me because I love them, but also I think they're worth talking about, like legitimately, seriously, scholarly. But at the same time, they also need the boost in a way that a lot of other movies don't. So
Absolutely. And the way you talked about bubbling up, the way that you bubble up through that is through innovation. And that's one of the things that you talk about in this show. And that's one of the nice things about the structure of having like different categories that you're focused on. So every episode is kind of focused on a different category. Is that right?
Yep.
And so I got to watch an episode focused on screen life. And so one of the things that you do in there is break down the innovations that people are able to explore through this medium that a lot of people look down on because they don't really understand it, I think. And because it's new and it hasn't been fully explored yet, and it's related to technology that people don't trust as well. And it's just a very different thing. And because we watch it on our phones. Yep. So you want to talk about the innovation aspect a little bit?
Yeah, well, one of the things that I sort of teased at this a second ago, but one of the things I frequently think about the found footage genre is because it is open to everyone, it kind of feels like in the same way that a Broadway show will get a write-up in a magazine where they'll review it, but nobody's reviewing community theater because they don't think it could be as, you know what I mean? They don't look at it as the same level of quality, even though you can have a fantastic community theater performance somewhere because it's genuinely the same thing. It's on a smaller budget, but it's passionate people with a talent doing what they do. I feel like this happens with found footage films where people don't take it seriously because they don't see it as on the same level as other kinds of filmmaking. And I don't agree with it at all. And so what was important to me for this show was every episode to look at the subgenre or subcategory we're talking about and look at it from two perspectives: a historical perspective, sort of a scholarly perspective of like, what was the journey that this happened on? And then the other one is sort of the psychological perspective, which is like, why is this effective? Why do we love it as filmmakers and film audiences? And I think in doing that, some of the things you explore are the innovations that only come from found footage. Like in the case of Screen Life. Screen Life is the only film, the only kind of film right now that is speaking a language that we all communicate in every day. We're literally doing it right now. We're making a screen life conversation. So much of the world communicates that way now, but only found footage films are mimicking that. You know, like even bigger titles like Missing and Searching, there's still found footage films that are learning to communicate through entertainment the way that we now just communicate for all pragmatic purposes. And that's what I love about found footage is anytime there's a new kind of camera, a new way to shoot, a new technology, found footage is the first one on the scene because everything is an innovation. Every possible camera, a backup camera, a nanny cam inside of a teddy bear, you know, like any place you can put a camera, that's a potential place for a film to happen. And so that to me is one of the fascinating things about found footage generally, but particularly in Screen Life, I talk about the idea of the innovation, because that one is one that you can't even really do in other genres. It requires found footage as the framework for doing it.
Will you talk about some of the other categories that you explored? You said you had 5 episodes. So what are the others focused on?
And so there are probably places where you could sneak around and find the names of all the episodes, but because I still want there to be some suspense, I'm not saying what the final 2 episodes of the month are unless they've already been announced. I can't remember. But the first episode, or on Wednesday, June 4th, is when it premieres, and we're doing 2 episodes on the first night. And one of the episodes is one that you saw, episode 2, which is Screen Life. The first episode is Bigfoot. So we're doing the 1-2 punch.
Some
cryptids and some technology. I like that they're sort of almost opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of like, you know, one is driven by technology and one is sort of about like old school. You know, it's entirely analog because it's literally, you know, stuff happening in the woods and everything and sort of getting back to nature. So I liked the idea of the juxtaposition of the 2 of those. And then the only other one I will say is the follow-up week, week 3 is, or week 2, which is episode 3, is about zombies, particularly zombie found footage films. And that's an important distinction. Each one of these is about found footage. Some of them are, in the case of Screen Life, about the way they're shot, and some of them are just about a specific genre, but seen through found footage. So like Bigfoot and zombies are more like these are subgenres and what happens in found footage, and then Screen Life is more like a style.
That's really cool. I like that a lot. And I've seen some names attached to this in the different press releases that I've read on Dread Central and in different venues. So I know about some of the filmmakers who are involved in this project, but are there any that you want to talk about in particular?
Yeah, well, we got really lucky because when we decided to make this, when I say why do we always do that? I say we. This show was made by me, and really nobody else except for the guy who helped me do all the production design. Well, let's go ahead and say
It's
I.
the film talk speak. We have
Yeah,
to do
it's
it.
the royal we. So
Yes.
when I started deciding to make this, one of the things I knew from both an aesthetic and practical reason was I wanted to make it found footage style. So it's not just a documentary series about found footage films, but it's shot like a found footage film. And what that freed me up to do was to get interviews with people that I would never be able to get if I had to pay for a professional crew to go to their house and shoot the footage. What I did was I just reached out and I said, listen, it's going to be found footage style. Do you mind just pulling your phone out of your pocket, answering a few questions and sending it to me? And a lot of people did, a lot more than I thought we're even going to be able to. And so it's very exciting to have some big names like Lesley Manning, who directed Ghost Watch, appears in the series. And she's a legend. She's for me, in terms of like the influence that a single found footage film has had, you've got Blair Witch, you've got Paranormal Activity, and then you've got Ghost Watch. And Ghost Watch, because it's older, it's like almost a decade older than Blair Witch Project. It was early days for that, the awareness of that even, you know. It was a huge phenomenon when it happened. So it was great to talk to her. I got to talk to Corey Grant and Dylan Brown, who both directed. So Corey Grant did
Lost Coast
tapes. And Dylan Brown, obviously Tahoe Joe is a huge, Bigfoot movie. So, and then there's some, obviously, I don't want to give away. There are definitely other faces that if you're a found footage fan, there are other faces in here that will surprise and please you, for all 5 of the genres. And then we also have some faces for people that were not filmmakers, but faces that you might know, that we call them like experts and super fans. So some of them are YouTube channel people that you might know from found footage. Dan Scully, who, if anybody who's watched my movie Ask, Dan, who appears as the only guy who sees immediately through my bullshit. He appears because he's, he's a film critic and a, cultural commentator. So he's there. Preston Fossil, who's an author. So there's a lot of really cool people that pop up. And Grady Hendrix, who I have to mention, who's the coolest. He's the busiest writer in the world. And he wrote, he first got onto my radar from his book Horror Store, which is basically sort of like what if an IKEA magazine was also a horror novel. So many amazing books, and he's super, super busy, but he's a huge Bigfoot fan. And so he did a segment specifically dedicated to Bigfoot. And he talks about some really fantastic stuff. I won't spoil it all, but it's a really interesting conversation. So yeah, I got really lucky that a lot of people were very as passionate as I am, if not more, about found footage and each of the individual topics. So so amazing voices talking about cool stuff.
The whole structure of it works out really well because you start out the episode and with you, who's a fountain of wisdom and knowledge about movies and found footage in particular. So it's really fun to listen to you. And we start out with that, and then we move into some filmmakers, and you have so many in one episode. I just think it works out so well. As a structure, it flows really nicely, and you learn a shit ton in each episode, and you get a lot of great recommendations on top of it.
Yeah, I mean, I knew my goal in some of the segments where I'm just talking about the philosophy and stuff. I was like, I can either come up with just like B-roll, boring B-roll, or I could just have footage from trailers of movies I didn't even get a chance to talk about still playing, because then we double or triple the number of movies in this subgenre that we can name check, And so you might be listening to what I'm saying and it's interesting. And then the second view through, you're just writing down all the titles that I didn't even talk about, but that they appeared on screen. Because, for me, ultimately, at the end of all of this, it's great to have the cultural and philosophical and historical perspective. But at the end of the day, like I think probably you're watching this because you want a bunch more movies to watch. So I want to make sure I deliver on that,
Yeah, it's amazing. And you had Michelle Iannantuono in the episode that I got to see, and which was crazy because just a few days ago I watched Live Screamers for the first time, and I'm writing an article about her for horrorfan.com. So it was really exciting to see her on there. And Live Screamers is just amazing.
Yeah, and the amount of work that she put into making those 2 movies, because you think, you shot a guy playing a video game, but no, she animated the entirety of those video games. She created it herself. They didn't just like, buy a game, have somebody play it, and then they reacted to it. Like she had to build it from scratch. It's unbelievable the amount of work she put in.
It's crazy. And so I'm really excited about seeing all of the episodes that come out with this. This is premiering on Found TV
Yes, so it's
you
an
want to?
exclusive premiere on Found. It will eventually make its way to other platforms, but I have become friends with Louis and Monica, who run Found TV, and what they do is so awesome. The way that they're supportive, I think, to the degree that like they love found footage so much that they also have films that won't. They don't even, like, I don't know what you call it, quote unquote, pass muster to other platforms, and they still want to put them out because they recognize that found footage fans want to see it all. So like, you literally, short of like, I can't tell what's happening or I can't hear anything, you know, like if they recognize that it's a found footage film that might have a following, they really want to put it on there. And I wanted to be a part of what they were doing. So when I told them I was working on it, they were interested. And I was like, well, why don't we premiere with you guys, you know, to make an exclusive premiere, and then eventually it'll come out everywhere else, but we'll make it, you know, Found TV first. So
yeah, that's amazing. And I love what they're doing too. They have such a great selection over there. And the community that they have is really nice as well. So I think it makes sense. It's like a good fit.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm proud to be the first nonfiction programming that they have had on their on the platform.
Amazing.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool because it's shot in found footage style. It's a documentary, so it's the very first one that's technically a nonfiction program. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's true. Oh, awesome. Well, congratulations on that. And do you have any episodes that are your personal favorites that you've done so far?
Well, of course, I'm going to say yes, and I can't tell you what it is. It's the season finale.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I can't tell you. The reason I can't tell you is because it involves giving away something interesting about the subgenre. What I can tell you is that it involves green screen. The only one that I think I did is on green screen, and there's a specific reason for that. Because actually, while you sort of hinted at it a little bit, I didn't really mention, each episode is designed aesthetically, visually, to look to some degree like it fits within the subgenre I'm talking about. So like for Screen Life, it was actually, I designed a computer desktop, and I appear in one window and the other things appear in another window. And then like in the Bigfoot episode, I'm actually walking through a construction site out near the woods for that segment. And so like there's a little opening text crawl kind of explaining the narrative hook of the episode, you know, like in that one, it was about someone had taken the computer and I had to log in to figure out how to get on the Screen Life one. Bigfoot, talk about like I'm out in the woods looking because animals have been disappearing since construction started near the woods. So like each one kind of has a narrative hook to it and an aesthetic look that fits the genre that it's in. So that gives you as much hint as I'm willing to provide about episode 5, which is I recorded my stuff in front of a green screen for that one, for a specific subgenre. But that was my favorite because it was the first time I did anything even remotely that complex technically, because all the other ones are very much found footage style in the same way I shot Ask, which is close up, first person, sort of I'm holding the camera while I'm shooting it. And that was the first one where I tried something a little wild, a little off the beaten track. So
I like that, and I like because it makes it kind of exciting to keep people interested in every episode, and you're also, I don't know, I think it's a way to make yourself a unique host too, because you're kind of living in that world as you're discussing it in a way.
Well, I also my hope was also that it would be anybody who's watching this. I think there are a lot of people who are found footage fans. But I even wrap up every episode with today's found footage fan is tomorrow's found footage filmmaker. Because I think the more you watch, the more inspired you become at the possibility that you could do it yourself. So one of the things I want to make sure with this show is that like they could see, I'm just some dude. I don't have a ton of money. I don't have a ton of resources. But for 5 episodes, I found a unique place and a unique idea to frame this story for the, whatever 30 minutes that it's on screen. It's not as challenging as you think if you just think outside of the box. And so my hope was for that to be inspirational to people watching as well.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that definitely comes through. And because whenever you're listening to the filmmakers talk about it, I know whenever I was watching the episode, I got really excited just listening to how excited they were. You're like, I could do this, because you always have ideas of stories that you want to tell, and you wonder, there's just no way I can make it happen. And the number one reason people say it is because of money, right? And you are a person who's a very wonderful prophet of this idea of, or I don't mean prophet, I mean apostle. I don't know.
Hey, I'll take it. I'll take a prophet. That sounds pretty awesome.
I mean a preacher, like an evangelist of this idea that anyone can do it, and you've proven it many times in the past.
You know, fingers crossed. Like in the same way that Ask was motivational to people, or hopefully aspirational, in that it cost less than $250 to make. This show, you know, I haven't been talking about the budget of it because that's not the point of it. But I didn't actually. Right. I probably spent less on this than I did on Ask, because it's a very different kind of a thing. Like a ton of the screen time is taken up by filmmakers talking about their stuff, or trailers and things like that. So it didn't cost me all that much to make, but I think in some ways there's a level of technical complexity and maturity that wasn't there for Ask that is now, but I spent less. And so I think that's an important lesson for people to be able to take away too, which is like, you'll get better at stuff. And when you get better, it's not as hard as it was the first time. You know, the first time is going to be a challenge. You're not going to have much money, but the next time you might realize, oh, I don't need as much money. I've just gotten better at the things that I had to figure out how to spend money to do last time, you know?
Yeah. It's found footage is so amazing because it's about filmmaking. It is filmmaking. I just think it's just wonderful for that reason.
Yeah. Well, it's one of the genres that sort of comments on itself in real time, right? Like, it's a movie that's also commenting about the idea of these movies. And actually the genre is doing the same thing, like what we talked about with, you know, when a new technology comes out, they figure out, well, how do we use that technology to tell the story? You know, when the 360 camera came out, they made a movie that was a seance that took place with a 360 camera in the middle of the table, and the whole thing was a single shot with a 360 camera. That's genius, you know? And that's the great thing about found footage is like, there's no limit to what you can do if you think of an inventive way to use a technology that hasn't been embraced by quote unquote mainstream filmmaking.
I wanted to ask you about, who should watch this show? That was one question I meant to ask earlier.
Well, the producer in me says everyone in the world should watch the show, of course. No, I think the people who will get the most from it are two kinds of audience members. The first one is someone who is just sort of starting to delve into found footage, and maybe they've seen a title or two that they like, but then they've also seen a bunch they really don't like. And they're like, I see a lot of this posting sometimes. They're like, you know, I really liked this and this, but then I've watched 6 other movies and I haven't liked any of them. Should I bother, or are there not that many good ones out there? And for me, I think the show is good because what it shows you is there is a huge amount of movies. And sometimes it's about you figuring out what is the thing you liked about those couple of movies. It's not just like, don't just watch 40 found footage films because they're free on Tubi. Figure out what the things were that you liked about the ones you saw, and then it'll help you to dig in and be more, more discerning about the things you're looking for. You know, because listen, in any genre, there's a bunch of crap out there. Don't give up on the genre. It's not the genre's fault that there's some movies that are bad. You know, especially when there's a low barrier to entry for found footage, so the percentage of lower quality movies is going to be higher. So that's the first category. I think is people who are just sort of like stepping in the shallow end and learning. And then I think equally, if maybe not more valuable, is the people who love found footage movies and have watched a ton of them, because this does two things. I think it helps to give them context for the stuff that they loved, right? So the history and the philosophy of why the genre is effective, I think will help them understand maybe something about themselves and why they like it, but also help them understand the birth of the thing they like. And then, of course, they're going to see whatever, 25 potential movies in this subgenre that they like that they had not heard of. And even the deep cut one, like even the people that have seen a bunch of deep cuts, I still feel like you'll probably walk out of here with 5 or 6 titles that you haven't heard of or haven't seen. And like, for me, that's the goal, is like, if you could walk away from a half hour of TV with 5 new potential found footage films that sound good to you, like I don't know if it's a home run, but it's a triple.
Yeah. No, yes, and I think everyone should watch this show.
I think another thing that it's important, I think, for everybody to know when they watch this is that this is not going to be a show that tells you what not to watch. The show is a big tent show, and it was very important for me to say that in every single episode. When I start the recommendations, the first thing I say is, if this one doesn't sound like it's for you, that's fine. It doesn't need to be. Just move on to the next one, but let people enjoy what they enjoy. Because one of the biggest problems in any kind of filmmaking or fandom is gatekeeping, right? Is people who think they know best about whatever, and then making other people either feel bad or take a litmus test or whatever in order to prove something. And that's always bothered me, but it bothers me particularly for found footage, because found footage should be the most welcoming arena, because you can be what I am. You can be a person who loves watching found footage, and one that makes them, and one that writes about them from a scholarly perspective. There's no limitation to these categories. So stop stop creating boundaries for people to be able to access them, because that is what keeps it from, for me at least, feeling like a genre that has been accepted. It's never going to be mainstream, but like accepted by people and taken seriously, as opposed to just, you know, I think it's one of the reasons why people don't want to pay to see them. They only want to watch them if they're free streaming, and they don't want to spend any money, is because they don't feel like they're real movies. And I would argue they're not only real movies, they're the evolution of where filmmaking has gone. It's the new language of film. And so in a way, it's actually more sophisticated than traditional filmmaking. So treat it with the respect it deserves, because it's actually really groundbreaking.
Absolutely, 100%. And I think everyone needs to hear that. So that's why it's great that we have these conversations here. And everyone needs to watch Ask, because that is the prime example of this. And Ask, it is, and I always say I'm not buttering you up whenever I say it, but it was one of my favorite movies that I watched last year. And I think everyone needs to watch it. It's just brilliant. But you want to talk about Ask a little bit?
I did want to just say, you know, and not just because you're recording this, but since you're recording it, I'll go ahead and say it so everyone else can hear it too. You were an early supporter of Ask before anybody knew what it was, where the only place online you could even find it was like, I think it was the POV horror app, and like then eventually it became on Fossum. But then it has moved out now. It's on Fossum and POV still, but it's on Amazon, and it's now on Tubi. And I wanted to tell you that I really appreciated the early support that you had, because one of the things that has happened is now that it has reached other platforms where people are more easily able to find it, or it's popping up in recommendations, as people are doing searches to find out about it, they're finding the interviews that I did with you and Voices from the Mausoleum and other places, and they're giving the movie a chance that they wouldn't have otherwise. And what I have discovered is that it's being very well received within the found footage community in a way that I didn't expect a, you know, sub $250 movie to ever have been received. But part of that is because in found footage filmmaking, what I've discovered since last we talked is the fan community trust other fans as much, if not more, than they trust anything else. More than a marketing campaign, more than a trailer, is the word of mouth from somebody else. And largely it's pragmatic in one sense. These movies aren't getting a lot of coverage elsewhere, so where are you going to go but other fans? But also they know that like anybody can go and say, you know, this movie was great, or they can fake a few reviews on IMDb. But like 50 letterboxd reviews that all talk in various levels of positive about a movie make it more likely that someone will go watch that movie. So you were one of the people that was first on board with that, and I really appreciate it because it has made a huge impact. I'm genuinely sort of taken aback at the positive reception that the movie's got. I mean, it hasn't been across the board. Obviously, there are some people who point out, reasonably so, the threadbare nature of certain aspects of the movie because of the budget, but everybody is really supportive of surprisingly the performance, which feels nice, but more than that is the storytelling. They really liked the story that it told and what it was saying, which is what matters most to me. And that's largely due to people like you who were, you know, kind enough to let me come on the show and pontificate for minutes at a time about stuff like this. So I really
absolutely, and I'll never stop because I think that it's something that we need. Every episode I'm going to talk about it now, but we need it now more than ever because we have to show people that art is important and that everyone can create it and should create it. Even if it's not perfect, you need to go out there and do it because otherwise the world can feel very overwhelming.
Yep. Yeah. In fact, I would argue obviously there's no such thing as perfect art, but I have recently in my anti-AI days, what I have realized is that sometimes the thing that you want to make is not perfect, and it's better because of that. Because the movie that you can make with all of the imperfections and the weirdness and the specificity, that is the way to fight a system that just wants to turn everything into a square they can fit into a spot that a machine can then replace you doing. So for me, it's like you should go out and make the dirt cheap movie that's maybe a little sloppy, because guess what? Nobody's going to waste their money and time telling AI to make the thing you just made, because it would be too expensive for them to have a robot do what you had to do. You know, it wouldn't be worth it. And so in some ways, this is our way of fighting back against a system that wants to replace us in an entertainment field, is to like make a thing that there's no way in hell anybody would spend their time doing. You know, make a thing so unique and so weird and so specific that nobody but you could have.
And horror already is this is the punk
Yep.
genre, you know, and
100%.
so it's
Yeah.
kind of the
It's
punk
like
within the punk.
I kind of feel like found footage is the horror of horror. You know, horror is the genre, the black sheep of genres, and then found
Yeah.
footage is even the black sheep of horror. You know, like it's the sort of the subcategory of the subcategory, and in a way that's great because it frees you up so much to just like there are no rules, there's no guidelines. It's punk rock, it's community theater. It's like whatever you got to do to make the thing happen, you do it, and then you put it out in the world. You know. Punk bands learn
Yeah.
3 chords and then they write an entire album. You know what I mean? They don't need to know everything about music. They need to know about passion and how to get a gig. You know what I mean? That's kind of how I feel about filmmaking with found footage.
That's great. And I love the quote. It's punk rock. It's community theater. I love that.
Yeah, I'm probably the only person in the world that equates those 2 things so specifically, but you know.
Yeah. What else do you want to say about your show, Chris?
I have ideas for at least one more, potentially multiple other seasons for the show. You'll notice in watching 5 episodes, there are probably subgenres of found footage you love a lot, and they didn't get talked about because I only had 5 episodes in this first season. So what I will tell you is I have not only the concepts for season 2, but I have some of the interviews for season 2 done with some people.
Oh, yes.
So there is the potential for a second season, but that can only happen if there is enough support from audiences, you know, enough, not just awareness, but like genuine support and like the, you know, people watching it, streaming it so that it makes it back enough money that the people that would have to work on the second season, because the second season is a little bit more complicated. It just financially, it has to be worth it. It doesn't have to be a ton. I just need the support of the community to say, yeah, we think it's worth you spending the time and the effort on, you know? So I would just ask if you don't like it, that's fine. You don't have to do anything further. But if it's something that you like, you know, stream it, share it, post about it, you know, that kind of stuff, because that is, especially in the found footage community, that's literally the lifeblood of any movie that makes it, you know, aside from like we talked about searching and missing, you know, movies that have the backing of studios, everything else is done by the community. It's the most word of mouth that film exists in the modern day. It's the most word of mouth type of film. And so that's the way to get something. Like I am now working with 3 or 4 other people on projects solely because of the good positive word of mouth that happened with Ask. Like I'm working on projects with people I never would have had the opportunity to do solely because the community has been awesome about not only supporting the movie and watching it, but then just like telling other people, telling other filmmakers, and then them discovering it. Like it's this, you know, it's not a whisper network because it's not like it's secret, but it's just like this network of connections of passionate people talking to each other, you know? So if you like it and you want to see more, I definitely got them. It's just a matter of making sure that the audience is there to make it, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And I love how you're highlighting too the community aspect here, how everyone kind of gets excited to work with someone when they see them put their art into the world and they reach out and say, hey, do you want to work on this together? I think that's super amazing too about the community. Yeah,
and I mean, you know, it's not out yet, but I'll just mention it because it's coming, which is I wrote an entire book called Make Your Movie Now, feature filmmaking using creativity in less than $500. And the premise is basically how to do this entirely on your own. It's finished writing. I'm putting the last finishing touches on it, and then it will be coming out very soon, the next month or 2. And for me, all of these things are connected. Ask was the example of that book. The book is the execution of that book. And this show is the presentation of all the people who hold the ethos of that book in their hearts, which is, you know, all the people that went out and made all these movies. So they're all part of like, you know, a bigger picture, which is like, you can enjoy the movies, you can share the movies, you can also go make the movies, you know? It's the one place in which if you didn't like a movie, you don't have to complain the movie was bad. You can say nothing about the movie and you can just go make the version of the movie that you would have liked better. What I hope people would take away from this show is like, it's a big enough tent. Found footage is a big enough tent that there are things you can love and the things that you don't love, someone else will. So you don't have to put any of your energy into something you don't care about. You can let somebody else do that. Just enjoy the things you enjoy and let everything else go by you. I just hope that people who hear about it, if any of it sounds interesting, I hope that they would just give it a chance, because I think even if it's an episode that you're like, I don't know if I'm crazy about Bigfoot movies, well, watch the Bigfoot episode. And the reason is because there might be context in there that gives you a key insight that will make Bigfoot movies interesting to you in a way, like talking about the Patterson-Gimlin footage that of the first Bigfoot discovery will suddenly make it click with you like, oh, holy crap. Most found footage stylistics and aesthetics actually came from that first piece of Bigfoot footage. Wow, that's mind-blowing, because now I understand that that piece of footage, that real-world footage, influenced an entire genre. And so it becomes more important to you because you have context on it, you know? So I just hope people give it a chance, because I think those kinds of things could make a difference to people, and in some ways, like, matter to their level of enjoyment and understanding of found footage just in general. In the credits of the show, I specifically mentioned generative AI was not used in the making of the show.
I saw that.
It's important to me for people to feel like I didn't take a shortcut to get to a thing by utilizing someone else's talent, because I feel like the people who make these movies, they did it with their heart on their sleeve. They used their passion and what little money they had. And for me, that's what's more appealing. Like, sure, anybody could make a Gen AI thing, and, you know, they could say, do this, and then it will do all the work of getting you to there. But, like, do you really have any ownership of that? Do you really get to take credit for that? We get to take credit for all of the stuff, mistakes and successes combined, because they're actually ours, you know? I don't know. There's something valuable about that, I think, to take away as an audience member as well as an artist. Like, you should be happy, like, when you see something and you're like, I know how they did that, but I also recognize the ingenuity of them doing it. That's valuable. That's more valuable than when you can just say, oh, you know what? I know I can probably guess what prompt they put in to allow a machine to do that for them. There's a marked difference for me in those things. Like, it's the difference between me. I used to say it's the difference between understanding something and feeling something. You know, I can tell you that I'm tired, but you could also look at my bloodshot eyes, and you can understand that I'm tired in a way that's more powerful than me saying it to you.
Very nicely said.
Let's get out now before we say anything else that's not anywhere near as interesting or profound.
My next question is much deeper than that even.
I
was going to ask you if you have any unique hobbies.
Well, so I don't have all that many hobbies. So the ones that I have are probably not all that unique, but I will say I'm a bit of I mentioned I'm a curator, but I'm kind of a collector of categories when it comes to entertainment.
Yes.
I'm obsessed with, I mean, the show bears it out, right? Every episode is focused on a single subgenre. I could have done it in a completely different format where I just I'm going to talk about 10 movies this week or whatever. But I went by subgenre because it's fascinating to me. I wrote an entire book called Horror Films by Subgenre, because I'm fascinated about the idea that certain things become codified, sometimes not even to a genre, but just a category of film that becomes codified because of psychological things about ourselves we don't quite understand, but they all appeal to us, right? Like, there is a whole category of talking dog films, right? Like, it's not a genre, but there's a bunch of them, right? There's enough of them that tapped into something in us as people. They were popular enough that somebody else made another one and then made another one. So it says something about us. So that's fascinating to me to try. And so if anybody goes on my letterbox, they'll see, I think I have like 200 lists, and it'll be stuff I call like not quite a genre, you know, like one of them would just be like movies about farmers on the edge, you know, and it's just like 6 movies where farmers are struggling in their lives, and they do something that they shouldn't have done because they couldn't take the struggle of their, you know, hard scrabble life, you know. But like, there's something really fascinating to me about the idea that we can accidentally codify things that say something to ourselves psychologically, so much so that we keep making them even if we don't necessarily understand what it is that it's saying about us. So that's one of I guess you would say that's my most unique hobby, is like gathering human experience by way of subgenres and categories of storytelling.
And that's why I love talking to you so much, because that's the type of thing that really interests me, you know, finding, I guess, trends or patterns in human behavior and analyzing it in a way, and seeing it, well, not analyzing it per se, but seeing what it reveals about our humanity. And that's like what art is all about in a lot of ways. So that's why we got to keep talking about it.
I've followed your channel ever since I'd been on it. I barely knew about it because you were fairly new when I first came on board. It was only been a few episodes, and I may have said it even before, but one of the things that I love about your channel is that you recognize that there is inherently something interesting to be talked about, even in a thing you didn't necessarily love or completely understand. And I wish more people in the community recognize that a thing you don't love is someone else's passion, and there is something to be unlocked about that thing that helps you understand that person. And there's something really powerful to that. And so I hope the people that watch your show and appreciate it, even if they don't recognize that consciously about themselves, I would like them to understand that means there's a level of empathy that you're displaying by doing that. And that's literally the only thing that fights the dark, is that level of empathy. So I hope I hope that you as a horror film fan don't feel, because other people make judgments about you, that you have less empathy. I actually believe it's the other way around. I believe that the reason that we're willing to go on journeys that are so difficult is because we want to understand the spectrum of humanity and all of the things that it feels. It's not just about how we feel, it's about how others feel. And that's why we're willing to take that journey. So like, take that journey with other people too, you know, like other people and other filmic experiences, you know. If it doesn't connect with you, instead of being angry about it or complaining about it, take a second to figure out, well, what is it that doesn't appeal about you? Is it just that it was poorly made? Is it that it was poking at something that you didn't like? You know?
Yeah.
And if it was, then maybe there's something worth exploring there. So
tell everyone when they can start watching the show.
yes. So it will be premiering on Found TV, and it's actually releasing for the entire month of June, every Wednesday in June. So the very first one is June 4th. That's a doubleheader episode, Bigfoot and Screen Life. Second episode is, or the third episode is week 2. So that would be the following Wednesday. And then we do that for all 4 of the Wednesdays through June. So as you tune in every Wednesday, you can catch the new episode for, you know, it's 4 weeks and 5 episodes. And then, you know, at which point you can rally everyone to go watch it again and, you know, plaster the world with information about it so that I get a chance to make this second season. So you don't, so nobody keeps screaming at me, why didn't you do an episode about paranormal investigations? I promise you I will if we get to season 2. I'm not telling you what episodes there are. I'm only telling you one that there isn't. And, you know I know I risk being canceled for not doing an episode about paranormal investigations, but I promise you it's coming. There's more work. You guys don't realize how many paranormal investigation movies there are in the world.
Oh, God.
A lot more for that one, so I needed more time.
Wow. Okay, well, you're holding categories hostage.
So 100%. Yeah. Gun to Paranormal Activity's head right now.
All right. Well, thank you, Chris, for coming and joining me today. So everyone go watch everybody go watch Found Footage Finds whenever it comes out on June 4th. Was that right? And thank you again, Chris.
Thank you so much for having me, man. I really appreciate it.